got a live studio audience as well.
Very true. We're in Digbeth in Birmingham with Dig Brew Co. Your brewery's got a slightly unique origin story.
Started when I was at uni, which is like how most of these stories go. I studied art. I made a bar in my studio space, buying like Cronenberg or whatever was on offer at Sainsbury's and doing pound donation. Obviously no money was made. We thought the donations would get us around licensing deals, but didn't. So we got shut down at some point. Brewed a little bit of beer there. I was in London, so Colonel was around, Beavertown was around, so I get to Howling Hops and Crepe and like Hackney Wick. Enlightened me. If anyone has ever heard of Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory, 99% of people wouldn't have. It's a big old pub in the Black Country in Tipton. Got to know the owners of that while I was studying, and they're the guys that invested to get Dig Brew kind of off the ground. They have a brand of beer called Lumphammer. They were just getting small local breweries to brew it for them. So then I got into brewing via those breweries before a terrible financial decision to start an actual brewery of my own kind of came.
Yeah, it's quite a unique space here.
We did actually look in Wolverhampton to begin with. Didn't find anywhere. When we started talking about Birmingham, it was like, big city. Didn't look at Birmingham and see someone doing what I wanted to do with Dig Brew. Burning Soul had very recently kind of opened. There's no reason that we couldn't complement that. Digbeth feels like, or looks like, the kind of the art quarters, or where the interesting stuff happens. It's an industrial estate, but like a Victorian one, and it's very, very, very close to the city centre. But there's very little city centre-ish about it, and the space here is quite cheap. You can pretty much do whatever you want. There's very little police kind of presence. No one really lives here, so it's a little bit Wild Westy, but you don't have to travel too far to get to it. We put on events to give people more a reason to kind of come to us.
You hold a lot of events.
There's an undeniable kind of like slightly horror-ish thing going on with Dig Brew, with like the drippy fonts. Halloween, we want it to be as like Halloweeny as possible. So we're building up the schedule now to brew beers specifically for the month of November. And we have worked in the past number of years with an opera company who made an opera about the history of beer. It's kind of with like women's history, and there's obviously witchcraft. And then we're drinking from these glasses, which are of an event that we did in February called Say Doom and Die, which was I guess Dig Brew's attempt at taking on the veil with Dark Days. We released like 10 Imperial stouts, 2 barley wines. We did Pizza House. It was our 5th birthday, and that was like a bottomless brunch, but inverted. So like every single time you bought a beer, you received free pizza. Financially terrible, but we did it for our birthday, so it was quite fun.
How do you balance specific event beers with
trying to run a business? Having this event mindset helps in so many ways that the hindrance doesn't upset us too much. Let's say we're going to make a lot of sour beers. Things that you learn on that kind of deep dive, it could be like 5 or 6 consecutive brew days making the same thing, and having those beers fermenting alongside each other, and your attention is going to be very much focused on that one thing. Lessons that you learn there are going to help you with your milds and your porters and your lagers. So I think it aids us to become a better brewery as well. Simply just making the same thing over and over and over again, your mind would be forgiven for losing focus sometimes. What you can sort of see is the kit that we started off with. These are the first kind of fermenters that the Pie Factory for us. 1,200 litres. And they're kind of strangely thin and tall, which was a design choice based more or less on floor space. We're just trying to minimise their kind of footprint. Higher something is, the more kind of like gravitational kind of potential there is, and that can put of pressure on itself, which people worried about kind of fermenting in those conditions. I think at 1,200 litres we're nowhere near big enough for that to have any kind of like real impact, so we kind of get away with it. But then as we've kind of expanded, we've gone for like different tanks. So over there, they're 2,000 litres each, and then there's a couple of big ones at the end, 3,000. I guess they're a bit more conventional.
The core beers that you do have, sort of release them in series. What sort of changes do you make between each variation?
Subtle ones. Optimo was always Azaka, Mosaic and Simcoe. For a little while, the Simcoe that we were getting in from our suppliers just was a little bit underwhelming. Like, it wasn't really like hitting the notes that we felt it used to. And so Andy, who's head brewer here, kind of made the call to swap out the Simcoe. We started to use Cashmere. The tweaks come kind of all of the time. There's no two like brewing processes that are saying that we always kind of have this like continuous small scale experimentation with every single beer that we make. Small tweaks to maybe like mash temperature or whirlpool temperature or whirlpool length. Identifying what those variables are and then just trying to keep all of them still, apart from one or two, helps to like learn your kit, so to speak. Even though Andy's been brewing here for 2.5 years now, up here 5 years, that learning of the kit is non-stop kind of operation, really.
So do you see the sort of different versions of your core beers and ways of learning about that beer?
Optimo and Potion are kind of the two most core Dig Brew beers. The recipe change is far less there than with a beer like California, which is sort of a core beer. The fruit changes in that's a fruit sour. But yeah, while there is no definitive like potion recipe, there's a potion idea, and we kind of approach it without going crazy, like quite fluidly. From my kind of point of view, in terms of like trying to explain why New England IPAs are so fantastic, is because it gets you very, very, very close to the raw ingredient of the hop. The double-edged sword on that one is that these things change so drastically between like crop years or the age of that hop. If you wanted to just play the scale perfectly every single time, and you were like, if it deviates away from this, I'm going to consider that to be a problem. I think you'd have a very, very hard time. And I'm not sure what you would gain.
So this is a session pale.
It's Zomoid, 4.5%. It's the first time we use Spectrum, Mosaic Spectrum at least. We've actually used that Spectrum again in the latest batch of Potion. Rather than just going straight into Potion, being like, right, we're changing this key ingredient, and we said, right, well, let's brew Zomoid, see what we learn, and yeah, we're very happy with it. So that's kind of now made its way into the latest Potion recipe.
The brewery has a bit of a reputation for like triple IPAs and big stouts.
In order to get enough kind of fermentable sugar for a double IPA or a triple IPA or like an Imperial stout, we need to mash at least twice. When we first started doing it, there were two identical mashes, you know, this temperature, this pH. We've started now to do two different mashes. So we split the malts differently, mash them differently, try and get the best of both worlds out of that system. Taking stuff like that has allowed us to kind of turn something that felt like a compromise in the first place into a completely new way of doing things. So like lessons that we learned trying in the early days, literally just trying to make an Imperial stout and then trying to improve our Imperial stouts, have led us to a beer called Milk Plus, which is 6.5% 6.5% milk stout, which I'm very confident will be as good as I think it is.
We use quite a few sort of experimental beers using sort of adjuncts.
The black IPA with coconut and pineapple, that was a collab with Exhale, who are from London, and using toasted coconut as a kind of post-fermentation adjunct. Something that we've been doing ourselves for about a year, and we've been really happy with the results. We used like dried pineapple flakes in the whirlpool alongside the whirlpool hops, and that was something that kind of Exhale brought to the table, which we really like the results of, and we'll certainly be like kind of incorporating that into some of the stuff that we do as well. And then I mean, the main adjunct that I guess we use would be like fruit that we use in like fruit beers, and we've recently kind of changed processes quite a lot in regard to that. You know, when there's like so much puree in fruit beers that like if you pour it really carefully, the first bit of the beer and the last bit of the beer, like two totally different beers, you have to like mix them all into one glass, and kind of the silliness and the like, I guess like the richness of that event of pouring that beer was something that we really wanted to create for our own. We were already putting a lot of puree into the beer with our things like California, but we felt it kind of had diminishing returns because you can't can pure puree. There has to be some beer in there somewhere. They've been able to kind of like spread that puree out throughout the beer packaging much better, which has kind of given us we feel a bit of a license to kind of increase that kind of fruit content even further. And that's probably, I don't know, 20 beers in the making. It is like kind of baked into every single thing that we do beer wise, but kind of throughout the whole kind of organisation, like constant experimentation, constant attention, and constant, like, you could call it improvement if you wanted. Yeah. And if you've been a Dig Brew follower for 5 years, I think those kind of changes and like innovations, improvements, you could say, if you wanted to, I think it's really evident. We do have two like horizontals. We used to have them underneath the bar. We use them as serving tanks, but we were also lagering beers in them. It looked filtered, but that's just a long time sitting in the horizontal tank. We did a double IPA and a triple IPA using only British hops. The Dipper's Waka Jawaka, and then the triple IPA was Big Swifty, and that was in collaboration with a chef called Brad Carter, who's got a restaurant, Michelin star place in Birmingham. He makes beer. He's done stuff with Braybrook and Yonder and Glass House. He kind of came to us and was like, I only use British ingredients in my restaurant, which kind of focused us to kind of see what we could do. We sort of said a lot of the beers that it seems as though you've made with other breweries have been kind of like wild fermented or mixed fermentation stuff with like foraged ingredients. And I was like, that's just not something that we do. We make IPAs, double IPAs, triple IPAs. You haven't made an IPA, it seems, so let's do that. So we use only British ingredients. There's quite a lot of new hop varieties coming out of the Charles Fairham hop growing program, which was exciting to use, and I guess we never would have done it without that cola being in place. They're kind of authored under the pseudonym of Studio Z, which was a Frank Zappa, which is, so Waka Jawaka and Big Swifty are two Frank Zappa songs. He basically bought a building and then let his friends record music there. And that was called Studio Z. So we kind of thought, in the spirit of collaboration, we'll call it Studio Z. The plan is to take those two beers, remake them with fresh ingredients, new hops when they're harvested in the UK this year, but to go for it far beyond just those 2 beers. I want to do 20 different beers.
Brews candidate before is the glow in the dark seals onto the can designs.
Before the pandemic, we weren't really putting anything into cans at all, really. We didn't have a canning machine, we had to use contract canners, which is expensive and it can be, or it usually is inconvenient. You know, the beer does what it wants to do, and you're like, yeah, but you need to be ready in exactly 3 weeks because that's when the canners will come. And then obviously COVID comes, every single tank is full of beer. And we decided to go into bottles. We got Blickman beer guns because we already had one. And we're like, we'll just by hand fill these bottles up. I just saw it as an opportunity. I was like, well, there's sort of no rules now. Let's not talk about this bottle thing as a compromise. So myself and Kieran, the kind of arched label, the line, I don't know, call it the perimeter line is like handmade. I guess that kind of tracks with like the handmade aesthetic of our like fonts and things. The wax dip was something that we said we would do for like quality control, I guess. We were just clamping by hand, so we wanted to make sure that was as good a seal as possible. When I was at uni, I made sculptures and I bought pigment for the resin and then on the shop where I was buying the wax from, they were like wax pigments, and I was like, oh my god, pigments. And then I went on the pigment shop and there was glow in the dark pigment, and I was like, yes, this is just good, this is totally going to work.
Do you see yourself becoming a more national brewery or focusing on Birmingham?
I think any expansion that we do would be very much like horizontally in terms of like more fermenting vessels, which would allow us to make more beers rather than just a bigger brewery and bigger tanks and just make lots more volume of the same thing. Really like it if you could kind of come to Dig Brew as a beer drinker and go and try their like dark beers. There's a place on the menu for a number of dark beers. We can present kind of what we've been working on there, but then also if you want more IPAs, then you can go IPAs. If you want fruit beers, you go fruit beers. If you want lagers, you do lagers. In order to achieve that, that's a lot of time. And then I guess from like a boring kind of sales point of view, got some advice one time at a beer festival. Don't worry about your city. In terms of like getting your beer into pubs and bars and restaurants in Birmingham, obviously you absolutely want it to be there. But pushing it really hard is going to be difficult because you know these people, and they know you, and the kind of the politics of that can become a bit complicated sometimes, and it doesn't need to be complicated. Just do your work and do it really well. You need to make sales, you need to make money. Just pick a different city. Right, we're going to really focus on Manchester or Newcastle or Leeds, and like pick that city, learn everything that you possibly can, and try and get as much beer in there as you possibly can. And just that separation will probably help you to do that better. Has been working quite well for us. We also export quite a lot, so we send beer to Japan reasonably regularly. Just got beer into Australia for the first time. We very recently just sent beer to a European distributor.
You do a lot of sort of pop culture and film references with your beer names, like does that like drive beer in any way? Is it just a bit fun?
Eddie fights Judge Doom, which is our like Imperial stout. That's a scene from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But then like the way everything sort of goes with Dig Brew is we made one beer and then we went, wow, I want another go at that. I want to develop that. We took 200 litres, filled a bourbon barrel of Eddie Fights Judge Doom. We released that as Eddie Loves Judge Doom. Then we've done Eddie Cross's Judge Doom, which is hot cross bun inspired. So like granola, like conditioned on granola with orange peel and candied orange peel and cinnamon. Eddie Toast's Judge Doom was what was that? There was a Scotch barrel with a coffee porter, an Imperial coffee porter in it. We took that and we blended it with some like fresh, extra virgin Imperial stout, and then we conditioned all of that on toasted coconut. Eddie Finds Judge Doom, Eddie Draws Judge Doom, Eddie Berry's Judge Doom. So yeah, like this is kind of now become a very like large part of our, I don't know what you call it, discography. And yeah, I guess we're kind of like trying to build a mythology around it. Dig Brew needs to work on a pick it up, drink it, that's nice. I enjoy that level. But I'd love it to work in a way that any kind of effort that anyone puts into it, in terms of paying attention to what we do, is I want that to be very well rewarded. The amount of work that goes into making our beer, the 5-year-long up till now journey of improvement, and the blood, sweat and tears that have been shed to get us a product that we're currently happy with, but we know we're going to try and surpass every single time we make another beer. That kind of branding and the events and the naming and we call it mythology if you wanted to be pretentious. That in my view is in honour of that kind of mission journey. It wouldn't make sense to kind of go, well, I've done all the labels for the year. They're just in a PDF, and when we need them, we'll stick them on the can. They go hand in hand.
Thanks for inviting me.
No, thank you for coming.